This is a great way to start off videos, sitting on the toilet. But really, this is part of my bathroom remodel series. So in this part, I'm going to be showing you how I redid the floor here, laid the tile, grouted, some of the tips laying it out, cutting around, actually as a toilet, taking the toilet off, cutting around that, where the drain is. So it's a lot to it. So I'm going to leave a link for my series here. So I've already done the tile in the shower, refinished the tub. I'm going to be doing the vanity, drywalling a lot. So, but if you're interested in this video, again, check the description. I'll put you some of the tools that I put down there again, or actually I put a link up here as well to that playlist for how I redid everything. This video I've done, or I had some new things I had to do. I did fast setting grout just because that's all they had. It sets in 20 minutes. But I tried it out. It actually worked pretty good. I had to do it in 2 sets, but it was fine. And then I haven't had to use grout release before, but I did that with this tile just because it had a little bit of a texture to it. It's glazed. It probably didn't stick, but it's easy. It comes off. So take a look and let me know in the description if you see anything, ways I could improve tile installation. I'm not a pro, but I've done enough where I can get it done in decent installation.
So your first step is to clean everything, all the floor, before you even sit down any of your underlayment. So I'm going to be using cement board. We want to make sure this is obviously clean so you don't have any bumps or ridges. Make sure you might need to level it out. Mine was pretty good, and I'm using 1/2 inch, so that's good enough. And so we started off with kind of laying it out. So you can see I needed to lay out around the supply line. There was the toilet, so there's the flange here. You can see I kept trying to get it correctly, but so you want to cut it out. Cut it out similar to drywall, where you just score it and kind of break it off. I actually used the tool. It's a little bit easier, oscillating tool. You can see me laying it down what I just cut out here. I got my temporary shoes on. I didn't want to scratch the tub, so I have the carpet, the moving blanket sitting on there as well. It's all a little bit difficult, especially in this little narrow area, but I finally got it down. I had to cut off that little edge, if you saw, it was hard to see, but around the supply line. Ended up actually knocking the supply line down. Had to go running for it. They pushed this past the clothes, and you can see where's the water everywhere. It was actually pushed all the way down and coming out, and I couldn't stop it. Yep, and so I had to put a fan on it. Luckily, it wasn't too bad, but I let it dry out. And then finally got to move on. So there's a pattern, the way that, depending on which one you're using. So I'm using the HardiBoard here. I think it was like every 8 inches or so, but you can just read on the container. And you just want it to be really screwed down and tight so it's not moving at all. You can actually see that little broken piece by the supply line. That's the one that hit, I think, as I was moving it. But so again, I just screw everything down here. You can see I have the ruler there, or the tape measure, just kind of help me score it. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just enough that it's going to hold it down in place. And one of the most important things with tile is laying it out beforehand, just to get an idea. I lucked out a lot of these pieces. I could do them whole, and then they got pretty close. Sometimes it's so you just kind of want to get an idea so that you are set it up beforehand with your spacers in there, so you know exactly how far it is. And then I put the markings on here, and I'm going to run lines down there just so I get an idea. And you can also you might want to adjust it even if it's perfect, just kind of so if there's obstructions like that toilet flange. So here I am laying it out. Just make sure it's square. You're not gonna be able to see it obviously once you're putting the mortar down, but it's good to have a kind of a line so that you can see that as you're going where you're going, you can make corrections. So that's what I found is have to making small correction every once in a while is better than at the end. And so I have my pattern also laid out here on my tablet, just because if you don't have a pattern, you don't need this. But I was just making sure, because I tried it a couple of times and was having some issues just kind of dry fitting it in there. So once you want to lay out the mortar, you can just push it down. You can see I'm doing this part, doesn't really matter as much. I'm just getting enough out of here. I'm being a little delicate. I probably didn't need to be this delicate, but you can see I had the lines on the ground, so I could see how much I needed to do. And then depending on the size of your tile, you're going to score through there, and what you're going to end up with is these ridges. So the size of the tile has different sizes. It's usually better to use the long side, but I was kind of stuck in this back or narrow area, so I was just doing a little bit at a time. I like the back butter. Sometimes I've seen quite a few people say you don't have to do this. I just feel better to do this, just so I have I know I have a really good connection on there, so that it's in the groove, so that when I lay it down onto the grooves on the floor, that it's a good fit. So it's always hard the first actual row, trying to get it straight, but just kind of get this, and that's what helps, having that line on the floor. And so you want to space it to, most of the time, if it's a wall and it's going to be covered with baseboard, you don't need to space it, but it's just going up against the tub and it's going to be visible. So I had to space it. You can't really see it there, but against the wall, and you don't want to I had to separate it, give it a gap there. So you don't want to put it tight against all the walls, otherwise as the house settles or things contract or expand, you might get some cracking, or it's not even necessary because the baseboard's going to cover it. So I'm getting my spacing here just to make sure it lines up correctly, double checking that I'm running along the lines. Again, just starting off. You also want to get it flat. I think I show it later. So there's a couple things. So you got a couple things you're all working on: getting it straight, getting it level, getting the gaps. You normally wouldn't be taking out the edges or the extra thinset, but I'm just I'm trying to do this first row and get it going straight. So again, I got all three of them there, and I got another piece. I've pre-cut these. You can kind of see I had to notch this one out a little bit. It was enough that the flange that comes down over that supply line will cover up, so you don't have to do a perfect hole or anything circle like that, especially when it's going to get covered up. So if you can kind of see on the wall as it narrows towards the corner, I actually have to end up making a not so straight cut. I didn't show it here, but I have a sliding tile saw, so it made these cuts a lot easier. You want to be careful; don't get that thinset anywhere where you don't want it to be, like on that toilet flange. So you can see here, I'm measuring it out and make sure it's not too tight. And I had to trim it a little bit, and you can barely see it. I think I have a better view here. It looks like it's crooked. It's not actually crooked. The wall's coming in at an angle, and so I had to cut it because I didn't want it tight in there. Especially when I have this, the baseboard I'm using is like half an inch thick, or like a little bit more, so I can have plenty to cover up that gap. I like to have a ruler in place. Usually I use a bigger, like a level, just to kind of see its level and also get a flat. But in this area is pretty narrow here, so I think it's like a 4-inch or a 3-inch. I'm not measuring, I'm just making sure it's flat. And then as you get to obstructions like this, I found sometimes it's easier just to kind of lay it out, and draw it on there. I have it lined up exactly where I want it to be. This one that I'm drawing on is not set yet. And you don't have to make it really tight. You get plenty of room. The toilet's going to clear over it. You can see here that there's a toilet flange I went around. I actually made a straight cut along the top there. It's going to be covered up around the top side of the flange. And then I'm using this the tape that goes across the seams for it, just to hold it together. And here, give you an idea with the magic of editing, how I've gone through and done everything up to this point. I actually had family coming in, so I couldn't finish the whole thing. I had to do just this area like this. But then give it a day to set, or just check it, depending on what kind of thinset you're using. I let it set overnight. And then I'm using this nylon brush and just cleaning up the grout lines before I put grout in there, so you don't have thinset and grout mixed. I actually got this lighter color grout just for this, the thinset. And this was it's first by using grout release. This was kind of a textured tile. It's glazed, but I just wanted to be sure. And this stuff's waterproof, and it comes off once you start grouting, so it shouldn't make a big deal. Especially if just don't add too much of it and get it all into the grout lines so it can't stick, because the grout would be releasing from the grout your lines that obviously don't want you want. So you just lay it on and just follow the directions. So I like this. I'm making my get my own grout here. This one's a little bit wet, actually, to dry it up a little bit, but you want it to be like a thick where it's not going to drip off. You can see this is pretty good. I added a little bit wet just because this is actually a quick setting grout. It sets in like 20 minutes, which I'm I'm not a pro, so I had to do it pretty quickly. I ended up not being too mad. I did this area in like 15 minutes. So you can see what you want to do is just get a bunch on there, and then you want to go at a 45-degree angle. You don't want to go straight at it, or otherwise your grout or your float will be digging in. I should be using the long side, but I'm just kind of stuck in this little narrow area. So I'm just working in, again, 45 degrees. To push it in, you might need to come at it from a couple different angles if it's not perfectly flat. And then once you want to come in, and then at a 90 degree, I'm not doing exactly 90, but that's how you then scrape it across the tiles, and that's how you then remove the excess. And you want to just essentially just keep moving it. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean, because you'll come back with a sponge later on to clean everything. Again, this is a little bit easier with the wide side, but I'm using the narrow one. I think my technique actually got a little bit better. I started switching to the wide side later. There's some pieces like right up against the tub here where I just had to get a little piece and put it in by hand. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect as long as it's higher than the tile. You don't want to actually have a finished grout line yet. That's what the later on when you do the sponge, you'll level it all out. You just want enough to cover your whole grout, or the grout to cover the whole joint. And then after it dries, all of them are a little bit different. Just read the directions. You want to come with a damp or a sponge. It's not going to be, it's slightly wet. You want to wring it out, and you want to go same thing, 45-degree angle. You don't want to go down and dig into the grout lines. You're just trying to take off any extra, and you're essentially leveling it off a little bit. And this is not the final. That you'll do a little bit more, like with that blue side. Or you might have a little bit of a scrubber. All of them are a little bit different. This one, I think, get 5 or 10 minutes to let it dry, and then come with the sponge and just kind of get off the little bit of haze. And then I think I had to wait like 2 hours and do the final one, but I'll do that later. Kind of doing a little bit nitpicky here. Just again, I'm stuck. And again, I had family coming in, so I just wanted to do just enough here to finish this off and then be able to set the tub. But I'll finish the rest of the room later here. But you can kind of see here, same thing. I'm leveling it off, and you want to keep a clean sponge. My thing of water's in the other room, but this is kind of the second time. And also, here's another mistake I made. Check to make sure you didn't do it too tight, so that the toilet screws can actually fit in. I actually had to pull the flange off and put it underneath here. You can see me struggling here. This is what it should look like, this where it slides in. Nice. But it was a semi-easy thing to fix. One thing you'll probably do is if you raise the tile level up or the floor, you're going to have to cut off your doors a little bit. I had to cut like 1/2 inch off of here just to give me a little extra room for the rug as well. I'm just measuring off it, like I said, I think like 1/2 inch, and I was just using my track saw, made it easy. You can use just about anything, but a circular saw with a ruler or a level or something like that. This makes it easy, especially when I'm making mistakes like this where I'm putting it on some plastic and it's moving all around. Luckily the track saw has a rubber kind of bottom on it, so it held straight to the door without avoiding my silly mistakes here like this. But then I moved on, came back after the other family left. Then I had to start working on the rest of it. And one thing you'll probably end up doing if you have a door or anything is you want to undercut it. It makes it a lot easier than having to like make crazy cuts. So I have the underlayment on there, and then I've got the tile, so I know the thickness, and I've added actually those black tabs are actually 1/16 inch gaps, and so I'm giving just a little bit extra just for a gap so that I can caulk, and then also to allow for a little bit of the thinset, because there's obviously some in there. I had to kind of work this around, but made it really easy with the oscillating saw. I have used back saws before, but this one was the trim got put underneath the previous installer put it, so it was a little bit hard. But anyways, once I got it in, so you can just slide it under there, and then you can make a cut. I got a little bit of a gap just for the thinset. And so I just started working. Here's the rest of it. You can see I had some couple mistakes here. Again, trying to measure, not doing it correctly. But both sides, of course. I think I cut one and had to slide it over. But you can see how it's going to go under there, and then the tile will be on top. And I'm just laying it out. There's a lot of cuts everywhere. The gap there. And then here's some quick jump ahead. I laid it out, so you can see I had to cut around, but you can see it, the tile going underneath the door jamb. It made it a lot easier. You can see the edge right there. So I had to make a cut, but it didn't have to be perfect, and it runs out like that. And so it'll get covered by the trim on the sides, and then the door jamb cuts it. You can see that I had several cuts here, and the way this one piece was just going to be too delicate, so I actually ended up cutting it across, and so I'll end up with a fictitious kind of grout line there, but it's so small, and it's going to be behind a door, probably in the closet door, so it's not going to be a big deal. So these are kind of some of the things, the obstacles you run into as as you're tiling. And again, I can show you, I keep running that line so that I can see where I'm going, so I can tell if I need to make any adjustments. And those gap lines, there's a special tape for that, concrete. So here, I won't show you everything, so I get to the end here. This is the last couple pieces that I needed to do. I pre-cut these just because it takes a while to like cut and get, especially at the end here, I wanted to get it perfect. So I pre-measured it and lined it up so that I could, the thinset wasn't drying as I'm trying to set this in here. And I'm getting my final gaps ready here, making sure my pattern's correct also. That was a constant checking that I had to do, because that pattern was a little confusing. But you can thank the foreman for that. So here I'm just making the last cut and just kind of measuring. So I think I cut the edge, and then I'm just using a pencil, because the pencil's easy, especially on this tile like this. It just washes off real easy. So I'm just checking the gap there, making sure it's not too tight. Then I went and cut it. You can see I slid it under the trim, and then laid it in place. So it got covered by the door jamb, and then my final edge there, made sure that was straight. Check all the gap lines, and it was all done. Finally, this took a couple days to do this, or I think I maybe did over like 3 days, just because I was doing different things. What's funny is I didn't notice that missing tile there until I went back and checked. Luckily, I checked this video, and then noticed it before it got too dry. You can see that I had to do a gap line on the other side there. So I let it set for a day, dry out, and then started working on that transition, or for the original one. You can see I'm doing I think my technique got a lot better here. I started using the wide edge, moving it a lot around better. I was moving quickly because this was again that 20-minute fast setting grout, which I hadn't used previously. But I was able to do this whole area in 20 minutes, so it actually lasted about like 30 minutes or so, and before it started setting up. So, same thing. Follow the directions depending on yours. Mine was again like every 5 minutes or so. I had to level it off and make sure it was pretty clean, just so that I didn't have a lot extra coming off. You can see here it's hard to see, but this is like the beginning of the grout line, where it's getting just a little bit level. It's not perfect, but that's what you're essentially trying to do here. And you can see the difference in the you can see it a little bit where it's a little bit lighter and the darker from where I'd previously finished to here. You can see that's the haze that's on there. So even though I leveled it off, there's still a little bit of haze. So I had to wait like 2 hours in between, and then come in and clean off that haze. So this is, you should see it cleaning off a little bit, and then I'm going to use actually the blue to scrape it. Not scraping up doing hard, but it's a little bit more than just a sponge. So what I'm doing again is just cleaning off that glaze. And you should be able to see the transition there right near where my knee pad is. I think I gave a better view here where you can kind of see it, but you can really see the haze coming off, and you can see the transition line there of if you left that grout haze on there. And again, you want to go at an angle. You don't want to go perpendicular to the line, so that your sponge or your microfiber is digging in. And you also want to into the grout lines. By this time, you shouldn't be able to do that, but you just don't want to cause any issues. So you want to keep it clean, have it on hand. I usually have 2 buckets because I like to just have a clean one, so I don't have to leave. So you really want to get all the water out of it. And that's it. It's pretty much just rinse and repeat. I mean, literally rinse and repeat. But it's all just kind of the same. It's just dealing with getting the line straight, planning out beforehand just how you're going to lay it out. That's the biggest issue. I have these other tiles on the right that they're going to be covered up by the vanity. And here's that grout line, like I said, where I had to make that artificial cut. I think it's, you know, it's not even noticeable unless you're really down on your hands and knees. And if you are, then you're probably going to find any other imperfections here. And so here's, I'm trying to show the other one from a distance because it's still a little bit wet. But overall, came out really good. I'm going to work on some further videos where I'm going to show, you know, baseboard and everything else.